The English Coach podcast takes my usual relaxed, accessible, human approach to your learning experience and offers you immersion into the language. Real themes, real people, and real conversation from wherever you are. The same is still true because my goal is still to enrich the learning experience of all my course participants, present and past, and anyone else who just likes the show. This episode today is meant to be a short one, a little bit different from the rest, and it is all about some of the things that drive this person to do the things the way he does. I've been working with rich media for a very long time. It all started long ago with a Sony camcorder that I once received for my birthday, then an old Pentax K5, after which I moved on to a K3. I couldn't quite explain the feeling of power I got from the camera at the time. Back then, I could only sense the potential. At any rate, I am glad I started, because as a trainer, now an active online trainer of adults mostly for English for work, the knowledge and working experience that I got simply from playing around with cameras have helped me to get to where I am today. Now everything is still not perfect, don't get me wrong. Like most people, there are still some rather fucked up challenges to deal with in my life. I do take responsibility for these things, but generally, I do like who I am today. So all of that leads up to a few days ago when a newly formed acquaintance of mine, a lovely young lady called Leah, I won't tell you her last name, asked me the simple question, why I photograph. Now I thought about it for quite a while, and as we usually do, we try to find impressive, fancy answers sometimes. Maybe waxing lyrical or getting highly political or philosophical or scientific, whatever the case may be. But I thought about it and actually came up with a list of things in answering that simple question as to why I photograph. Now the first one is, I want to make beauty last forever. And that sounds a little bit bloomish, or flowery, as we would say in English, but with good reason, because I did start my serious preoccupation with photography, with flower photography. And it was all about capturing the beauty of flowers, documenting them and posting them, and in some way making their beauty forever. Now, anybody who likes nature or flowers generally will know that observing the beauty of a flower is like looking into an entire new world. This is something that captured my interest in the textures, the delicacy, the richness of color, the way they move when they're not supposed to, and all these wonderful things that flowers offer us in their very own still small voice. And it is something that I still do these days, but sadly, not so much. Now, the other reason why I photograph was a little bit more selfish. It is because I wanted to take that beauty and I wanted to show people where beauty is. There's a lot of fixation here on beauty, but at the beginning, that's what it was all about. The beauty of which I speak, it's not really just the physical appearance, but also the knowledge, the stimulation, the intellectual stimulation that I got from it, from capturing the image that this flower presented us with at the time, or presents us with also the stimulation of the knowledge of what is actually going on, the natural processes that are at play and that are exemplified by the flower we see. So it's not just about the red and the blues and the greens. Now, the third reason that I thought about was what I like to call an escape to sanity. And why do I call it an escape to sanity? It is because a few years ago, I was going through some rather difficult times, and it was photography alone that helped me to keep it together. I do not know what I would have done if I didn't have photography. And truth be told, by that time I had moved on to dance photography, which is also quite stimulating, and it offered me a kind of escape to a world of art, a world in which I don't have to think about the problems that were at hand. And sometimes it fulfilled its role as an escape a little bit too much. I did lose myself somehow in dance photography. But again, truth be told, I did learn quite a lot about light and sound and focusing on a subject that moves through different lighting scenarios. It might sound simple, but there's a lot of knowledge at play there. There is a lot that you have to learn to work with dance photography in any meaningful way. So it was something that preoccupied me for quite a while, and I'm very glad that I had it. Now, photographing dance is all about usually documenting someone else's work. You're documenting someone else's stage. However, work with dance as a photographer also led me to want to create my own stage. And creating my own stage is what I get to do when I get my own dancer and create my own canvas with photography to express my own art. And this is something that I got to do sometimes when I wasn't photographing someone else's show. And that was a kind of a natural progression that happened to photographing my own stage. Now again, taking my own stage also evolved into taking ownership of my own media data and taking ownership of my own presence and digital identity. Now, that might sound a little bit heavy, but digital identity, shortly put, the way I understand it right now, is the expression of self online. It is a collection of everything we do online. And I have chosen to, instead of sitting and waiting for a story to be curated of or as to who I am, I've decided to use photography, to use media, to tell my own story, to say a little bit about who I am. Because again, a story is being written anyway. A story is being curated. And ever more and more, the more we speak of the Internet of Things, everything that is in connection or is connected to the Internet is writing a story of who all of us supposedly is. Taking ownership of my own presence and my digital identity is something that photography helps me to do. An image is, in and of itself, a story. And this is what it was basically all about. You know, I kind of wanted to put meaningful images out there into the world and not just, images of what I had for lunch today. Now, moving on from photography. Photography at that time represented a kind of a benchmark of what I was, who I was at that time, working with media, articulating my own digital identity, digital presence, and that evolved into also podcasting that you are a part of right now. Now, the podcasting is about voice. It is about putting voice out there. One reason why I've chosen to put voice out there is also about inclusion. Inclusion is the topic of that very special video that I've put out, but just recently, and I'm getting to that pretty soon. But it's about taking ownership, not just of your imagery, not just of your movements online, but also of your own voice for anyone who cares to listen. It is all a part of making my own stage, just in case someone or something else decides that for whatever reason, I do not deserve one. But I just make my own and don't worry about it. Now, another reason why I photograph in connection to all of this is, of course, the podcast. As I just said, it gives an example of what is possible when you or anyone for that matter, just takes the chance to try a little DIY. It shows what is possible when you step away a little bit from, again, what I like to call here the dogma of convention, and try a little DIY. It is an example of what can happen when you don't place too much emphasis on perfection and instead focus on what I like to call perfect imperfection. Nothing about what I do here is perfect. It is all DIY, and it's likely to stay that way because I like this traditional character of podcasting. I want it to stay intimate, I want it to stay personal, and I want it to stay authentic. Try a little DIY, do it yourself. I would encourage everyone to do the same. And this, the last reason, is an invitation for everyone to do the same. And why? Because if you happen to find yourself in, well, what we like to call a functional democracy, or anywhere that we again like to call the free world, then your voice is a part of the media. The media is not necessarily all separate and apart, and the media is part and parcel of any functioning democracy. So, use your voice. Take the opportunity. Use the opportunity and get your voice out. Follow the example. Of course, you cannot do it exactly the same way I do it. Maybe it doesn't work for you. But what I'm doing right now, it's not all about just putting myself out there on a stage, but it is living an example that I'd love to see other people who are themselves so inclined to follow. So then, as I promised, it's not going to be a long one today. It's pretty short. It was a kind of a personal expose. Normally I work with a script, but this time it was a little freer. I was speaking from the heart, with a measure of realness, as I so like to talk about. And you might get that feeling from the tone or the speed with which I speak. So then, as I always say, with a small win is always a good way to begin. Feel free to share the show with a friend. If you like what you hear, just share it. You can follow the show from anywhere you listen to podcasts. This episode today was about answering the question, why I photograph. And for those of you who stuck around to the end, there is also a small surprise. In the show notes of this episode, there is a lovely video, a collaboration which was done between friends. You can read all about it in the show notes, but it's just a little something that I did for fun and also for Pride Month in June, where I want to fly the flag today for inclusion. The story continues, and my goal is pretty much still the same. One of the sub-goals, so to speak, though, is, as I said, to take ownership of my own voice and to make my own stage. So one of the latest projects that I'm working on right now is what I like to call my very own private streamed group coaching offer. If you're interested in that, or you know anyone else who is, do feel free to ask about it. You can access my contact form at www.trainingtree.de/podcast or englishcoachpodcast.com. Feel free to share the show with a friend. And you can also send a comment if you like. You can use the voicemail button, which is quite nice for a lot of people. If you send your voice in, you can also say a little bit about who you are and what you do, maybe give some social handles. And if you like, you can even feature on an upcoming show. So I am looking forward to hearing from you, and bye for now.